Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast. I am Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. Episode number 197 of the show. It's getting there, folks, almost at 200. This week I have 9 new reviews for you folks at home. From some from me, some from my new correspondent, contributor, but all very good reviews. And that's going to include a review on The Wandering Inn, Volume 2. Also, review for A Jump into the Unknown Reality Benders, book number 5. After that, it'll be Deadman's Retinue, a NPC Pass, book number 3. Also, after that, it'll be Styxian Stoners May Break My Boners, a Caverns and Creatures short story. And last for me, it's going to be Mythian Chronicles, book number 1, which is going to be a slightly early review. Then, in Ian's Picks of the Week, we're going to have even more reviews for you folks. And we're going to go right into the LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we're going to start with a news, a relaunch of a sci-fi game-letish story called Nova Sky, written originally in October 2017 by Eden Red under the pen name KC Song. This is actually a relaunch. The author has said that they have edited the story and got new cover art for everything, that she really enjoyed it. I actually was one of the first few reviewers of this particular title when it first came out. It's being republished under the Safe for Work pen name Eden Blue, but if you like Eden Red stuff, you're going to get the same kind of good quality writing. I personally really enjoy the story. It had kind of, in the original version I say, it had more of the minor gamelet elements, but I really enjoyed the good sci-fi elements, mostly in the story. So definitely go check it out if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, or if you just want something a little more sci-fi. This is definitely going to hopefully satisfy that, but it is a relaunch, so it's not really into the new releases. It's not technically new. Okay, in other LitRPG news, we have Caverns and Creatures author Robert Bevan. He started a weekly deal for his short stories and other works. He actually sent us a message on Facebook saying that he agrees with some of the reviews, saying that for less than 50 pages, $2.99 is kind of expensive. But at the same time, I personally understand that's where Amazon starts giving the author 70% of the price instead of 30%, which is what like under $2.99 gets you. So I understand why he does it. But at the same time, he's actually started doing a weekly sale where he's putting one of his short stories or one of his works on sale for 99 cents. And this week it's going to be the short story called Shipfaced. And Robert Bevan has a ton of really hilarious short stories set in the Cavern the Creature universe. And so you're going to have plenty of deals. If you haven't had a chance to just go by weekly to either his Facebook page or his website at cavernsandcreatures.com, and you can check out the weekly deals and see if you've got it or not. But this definitely makes them a little more easier to purchase. But they're also usually on Kindle Limited, so you can actually gather them there as well. And plus, if you get Kindle Limited versions of some of these short story collections, you can actually get audiobook versions slightly discounted. So all kinds of reasons to go purchase these stories. Okay, in more LitRPG news, we have a story about the Fibble Army. In response to the atrocities committed by Daniel Shinoff to their literary cousin Fubble, the Fibble Army has arrived. They are demanding cookies and cuddles. This is just a joke, but Dave Wilmarth has actually gotten the adorable plushies made for his Fibble character, and they're currently on sale on Amazon. You better buy them quickly, though, because supplies are limited, and the last I checked, there were only about 20 left, so you're going to want to get those as soon as possible if you're interested in these adorable plushies for a fan favorite character for that particular well-beloved series. We'll link in the show notes for the Amazon page for that if you want to go grab some. And that's it for news. We're going to move on to stuff that's out now. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it is out now, and that includes Rift World Online book number 2. Also, The Dimensional Wars Dravinica. That is out as well. Also, Life's a Game and We're All Players, LitRPG Gods of the Sphere, book number 1 is out. Also, Sword Guardian. Then Reborn Apocalypse, volume 2 is out. Our contributor, Ian, has actually had a review for this one, but it just recently came out, but he's already read through it and reviewed it, so I'm jealous. Also out right now is Second Chance, A Battle Age Reborn. And the second book in the Frostfile series called The Forsaken Crypts. And from Jonathan Brooks, you probably know him more from his Dungeon Core stories. This was a paranormal LitRPG Dungeon Core story called the Spirit Core series. This one is the second book in the series called Children of Fear. I would recommend you reading book number 1 in the series. These are creepy as heck, I gotta say. And he published this last time about this year too, around Halloween. And they always go on my list of like creepy LitRPG stories for the year. And I'll be doing another one of those lists for next week when we get closer to Halloween. But this series is definitely great. I don't think I'm going to read this one just because the last one creeped me out a lot. And I'm not into that kind of stuff. But if you're into Halloween-ish kind of paranormal stories, I think this is going to be a good mix for you as far as LitRPG and paranormal suspense horror kind of stuff. Also out though is Light Online book number 1, Farmer, and the third book in the Dragonheart series, the LitRPG Wuxia series, is out, as is the second book in the Resurrection of Adventure series. Same cover art, different title. If you read the first one and liked it, this one's out. So there you go. And on to some new LitRPG audiobooks. We actually have quite a few good LitRPG audiobooks that have come out. Apostles of the Sleeping Gods, Discardian book number 2 is out, as is Accounts Payable, Nora Hazard, book number 3 in that series. Critical Failures, book number 7 is out. Caverns and Creatures series called Septipus. And Oblivion's Crown, Endless Online, book number 5 is out as an audiobook, as is The Sword Guardian, Forbidden Magic, book number 1. So good for them for getting their audiobook and their ebook out at the same time. So there we go. In upcoming LitRPG, we actually have Sky Peak, Sky Realms Online, book number 2, a LitRPG series, out on October 29th. We have, on October 30th, Illicit Lands, book number 4, Opposition. The 31st of October, the Varnoth, book number 2, The Black Blade. On November the 1st, it'll be a anthology short story collection set in the System Apocalypse universe. I remember that Tao Wang was actually making... putting out feelers to get these kind of stories a little while ago, and this is going to be the result. It'll be out on November 1st, called The System Apocalypse Short Story Anthology, Volume Number 1, a LitRPG post-apocalyptic fantasy and science fiction anthology. So these can be a lot of work, so hopefully this will be a nice way to get in touch with some new writers. Also out on November 1st, it'll be Awaken Online Ember, Tarot number 1, which seems like it's going to be a side story spinoff again. Also, November 1st, A Dark Path, Grimdark LitRPG for Forsaken Talents, book number 1. November the 1st as well is going to be Excise, a post-apocalyptic LitRPG, Ether Collapse, book number 2. On November the 4th, it'll be The Way of Deception, World of Cards, book number 2. November the 7th, Avatar of Light, Interworld Network, book number 2. November the 8th, Culling of Man. November the 11th, The Last Time Loop, which is the first book in that series. The fourth book in the Arcane Kingdom Online series is going to be out on November the 19th. Actually, that just came out, so I should probably delete that. That's supposed to come out on November 22nd, but the third book in the series came out this week instead. November 22nd would be Hard Mode, a LitRPG Gimlet Fantasy series. The Chronicles will be in book number 2. We're actually reviewing book number 1 of this series on the podcast this week. On December the 1st, rather, would be Rebel Star, a LitRPG post-apocalypse space opera, the System Apocalypse, book number 8 in that series. So there are already 8 books in that series. Man, Tao Wang writes fast. The second book in the Knockout book series by Dan Sorgonoff and Max Largano is going to be out on December the 9th. Heroes Online, book number 3 will be out December the 13th. The Good Guy book number 7, called The Bear Hunt, will be out on December the 14th. December the 20th, it'll be the third book in the Chronicles of Ethan, so you're going to get about one a month, apparently, in that particular series. And then December 23rd, it'll be The Wastes, Underdog, book number 2, which I enjoyed book number 1, so looking forward to reading that when it comes out. On to new releases, though, and reviews. And up first this week is going to be The Wandering in Volume 2, written by Pirate Abba. This is a massive 1,632 pages long. It is $3.99. It is not available on Kindle Limited. Here's the author's description. No killing goblins. So reads the sign outside of The Wandering Inn, a small building run by a young woman named Erin Solstice. She serves pasta with sausage, blue fruit juice, and dead acid flies on request, and she comes from another world. Ours. It's a bad day when Erin finds herself transported to a fantastical world and nearly gets eaten by a dragon. She doesn't belong in a place where monsters' attacks are a fact of life and where humans are one species among many, but she must adapt to her new life or die. In a dangerous world where magic is real and people can level up and gain classes, Erin's Solstice must battle somewhat evil goblins, deadly rock crabs, and hungry necromancers. She is no warrior, no mage. Erin's Solstice runs an inn. She's an innkeeper. So there we go. This is such a good story. It really is. It's an online serial story that's actually still available online at the author's website. It actually gives you a link in the novel description on the Amazon page. And that series is already up to like the middle of volume 6 apparently. So we're, as Amazon readers, a little behind, but we get a nice version of this anyways. And this online serial story just gets better and better. I really enjoyed book number 1, volume 1, I should say. I thought it was a great book. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Book 2 is better, in my opinion, mostly because the opening of book 2, of volume 2, is just a little more fast paced. Like the opening of volume 1 was a little bit slow, and I think that first section was probably the hardest to get through. But volume 2 just does not have that issue whatsoever. It starts off in an exciting way, and it just never really lets you go. I stayed awake multiple nights to read over 1,600 pages till like 2 in the morning, and I don't regret it at all. I really enjoyed reading this story. Volume 2 of the series, just like Volume 1, is a slice of life story, and it mainly follows the adventures of 2 women who were transported to a fantasy RPG world. Erin, who's an innkeeper as a class, and Ryoka, who's a runner, although that's a job, and there are brackets to differentiate between a class and like just regular work. There are other point of views in the story, including some very entertaining side stories. My favorite being the one where Erin's friends try to get her to mate, and there's a whole thing there. It's really entertaining. I thought it was funny because the author kind of rides this line between not saying anything overtly sexual, but still referencing things, and it's just fun to see Erin's unexperienced reactions to these like very just frank kind of conversations between these non-human friends of hers. So it's very fun. There are also some of the really good side stories in there as well. But the story mostly follows those 2 characters, Ryoka and Erin, just like it did in book number 1. However, in this particular series, it follows them as they explore the world, fight monsters, riddle dragons, experiment with mind-altering cooking recipes, tame wild princesses, and much more. In volume 2, I should say, the scope of the story does get bigger though. In volume 1, it very much focused on the main characters, Erin and Ryoka, although mostly Erin and Ryoka towards the middle and end of the story kind of became bigger figures, but also like the beginning starting town that they were in, not starting, but like the town nearest the Wandering Inn. That was mostly dominated by drakes and gnolls, and there's the big battle, and things I don't want to spoil for anyone who hasn't read volume 1. But in volume 2, the story really does get larger. It talks about a larger world building aspects, the history of all the continents, the events that have happened in the past that are now affecting the present, advancement of large continental-wide threats, multiple story threads with that are like introducing threats for the rest of the series, including the insect like Antium that advancing, the Goblin Lord, Lord of Destruction, the Necromancer, and plenty of other ones. There's a lot of material that you can see being developed for future volumes, which I'm really happy about because it portends some very exciting experiences. On the RPG side of things, I'd say things are actually a little more developed than in book 1. In book 1, volume 1, I should say, the RPG stuff took a little while to get to and to explain and to become part of the story and to like and kind of show how it impacts the story and the world. In book 2, it's a volume 2, it's just there all the time and actually gets this interesting kind of plot line of its own, and I thought that was neat. This isn't, even though the RPG system isn't like the big thing the same way it would be in like a Trapped in the Game story, it's still very much an important part of the story, and it actually becomes more important, I think, in volume 2 than it is in volume 1. Overall, great story, great volume, hard to put down. It just took me a long time to read because it's such a large thing. So I look forward to reading volume 2 as soon as possible. I'm trying to not to look online because I don't think it's fair to judge the free version that's online with potential editing issues before it's the paid version. But I know they're also working on an audiobook for volume number 2, which may take a little while to get to. But for me, great story, gets an 8 out of 10 again. That's The Wandering Inn, volume number 2. It continues to be great with a score of 8 out of 10. Okay, next we have A Jump into the Unknown, Reality Benders, book number 5, LitRPG series, written by Michael Atmanoff. It is 453 pages. It is $6.99. It is not on Kindle Unlimited as of this recording. Here's the author's description. We put an end to the war with the Dark Faction, but still, humanity's problems are far from over. More than half of the game's promised tongue of safety has elapsed, and yet humankind is no closer to forming a unified front. We've just begun building one of the 12 planetary shield generators necessary to give Earth complete protection. But we don't have enough construction materials, players, or time. Should we ask the parallel magnocratic world for help? Magocratic? After all, an invasion from outer space would hurt them just as bad. The mages, though, have plenty of problems of their own. What options does Gnat even have here? All he can truly count on are his own strengths and his personal relic faction. Should we put all our eggs in one basket and look for help in deep space? My technology from ancient, long-vanished races allow humanity to grow strong enough to turn back the onslaught before it's too late. So there we go. Full disclosure, I received advance copy for review. I purchased a copy when it became available. This is another interesting slice of life space adventure for Gnat and his crew. That's kind of what it turns out to be. As soon as the plot line with the Dark Faction was finished up a couple books, though, the rest of the series, book 4 and 5, kind of just became more of this slice of life adventure with the main character going on space doing stuff, and that's what this continues to be. It is entertaining. It is not... it is very slice of life feeling, though. There are minor arc progressions for the advancement of the Earth storyline, but there's a lot more just like general space stuff again. Space battles, interesting fights, interesting kind of intrigue stuff going on a little bit here. And also a really neat ending that I thought has some really cool story potential and a way to kind of shake things up a little bit in the story universe. So hopefully that turns out to be something really neat. But we'll have to wait and see until like number 6 comes out. But for now, this was kind of a good, solid, middle of the road, entertaining story. Gets a score of 7.5 out of 10. Let's jump into the Unknown, Reality Benders, book number 5, with a score of 7.5 out of 10. If you like book number 4, has a lot of the same kind of sections. So if you like book number 4, you're definitely gonna like book number 5. I did. And next we have Deadman's Retinue and NPC's Path, book number 3. This is the last book in this series. It is written by Pavel Kornev. It is 483 pages. It is $6.99. It is also not available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Getting stuck in virtual reality isn't fun, but being trapped in an NPC's dead body is really the pits. Still, there may be a way out, provided John can find the scroll of rebirth. The problem is, finding it is only half the hassle. Knowing how to use it is another bag of worms entirely. Several months of full VR immersion may have turned the cumbersome walking Deadman into a swift killing machine, allowing him to earn the patronage of the Lord of Chaos and even acquire his own crypt. But John is still a long way from reaching the coveted level 100, which would allow him to escape his virtual prison and rescue his own physical body. John is running out of time. He can't afford to play by somebody else's rules anymore, which means it's time to set his own. Would you really call his plan crazy? Earning all the remaining XP in one fell swoop by killing a terrible Lord of Decay? A crazy escapade indeed, but who better suited for it than our very own Dead Rogue? Okay, full disclosure, I received an advance copy for review. I purchased a copy when it became available. The story here picks up where book 2 ends with the main character embroiled in a tough fight in the land of the dead. From there, main character's goal shifts as he's now halfway to his goal of being able to leave the game, which has been the big arc of the series. Now he only needs to get 1 million XP in 29 days to reach level 99. For some reason it's 100, but his goal is made even harder though as he evolves into a greater lich and is unable to hide his undead nature anymore. And that's essentially what the plot is. It's the same thing that says the novel description. So they give quite a bit away, actually more than I do in the novel description. This series has always been very interesting. If you liked book 1, you like book 2, you're going to like book 3. If you're a fan of the series, you're a fan of the series. If you didn't like those books, this is kind of along the same stuff. It's very slice of life. It's very much RPG things are here. Yes, there's lots of leveling, lots of game stuff. But a lot of the plot twists and the way the plot ends up going kind of happen regardless of the main character's level. There definitely is a lot of wand-wavy moments in the entire series to advance the plot, and you kind of have to be okay with that if you're going to like the story. For me, it's always been kind of just like barely enjoyed. I think every single book in the series has gotten like a 7.1, which is like just barely in the line of like, yeah, I guess I was entertained by the end of this more than I was like annoyed by some of those forced plot points. And this one is really no different. I was happy to see that there was an actual resolution to the big storyline, that it didn't just end on this weird cliffhanger and nothing being written. That would have been really annoying, but there is an actual resolution, even if it is a little forced. I was like, oh, okay, well, we have an end and it clears up the big plot thing. So like, okay, that was fine for me. I still like certain aspects of the story. I'm not saying that I don't like it at all. I enjoyed how every book kind of tries to give the main character a new class or a new like race related to the undead, and it's always fun to see how he use those new abilities and those new kind of things to win in the story and to kind of maximize those benefits, or like to deal with the detriments that they caused. And this is really no different for me. So there are good things in the story that I still enjoy that aspect of it, but also just like, oh, look, we actually have some resolutions and it doesn't end in a cliffhanger. That's always nice. This series may continue on with some of the characters, but according to the author, this is the last book with this main character. So there is an ending here. So for me, it gets a score of 7.1 out of 10. That's Deadman's Retinue, an NPC's Math book number 2, with a score of, again, 7.1 out of 10. And next we have our next story, Styxian Stoners May Break Our Boners, a Caverns and Creatures short story written by Robert Bevan. It is about 30 pages, I think. As of now, the Amazon listed doesn't actually have a page count, but it's usually less than 50. It is $2.99, and it is all available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. I'm probably not going to say all the words in it. Julian and the CNC gang make a deal with the devils. Can Tim's tiny member save him and his friends from certain death? Lo, it is written in the book of Deuteronomy, one cannot hope to escape the devil's hole without first putting one's D into it. And that was slightly modified. All these short stories for me are always really funny. I always love hanging out with these characters from the Caverns and Creatures universe, from like the Critical Player series, Whitmer, the author, between those like larger like main series storylines. And you can read these in any order whatsoever. They're all kind of encapsulated stories or bottle stories. And this one is funny. It's irreverent. There's lots of cursing. There's lots of like sex jokes and your mama jokes, whatever. And so if you're cool with that kind of stuff and you enjoy these characters, you're gonna I enjoy these like I do. This one is no different. It's Stoners and Boners is completely right. This story focuses on those aspects in funny, inappropriate ways. And I'll be honest, I didn't expect that exact turn with those devils that are mentioned in that novel description, but it was still very funny. But be warned, there are sex references, cursing, there's use of herbage, which is why the snorn part is in there, and lots of dirty jokes abound in this short story. And so I personally find it hilarious, but you kind of have to appreciate this kind of potty humor, sense of humor. So if you like stories like the Kevin Smith movies or things like that, then you are probably going to enjoy these kind of stories too. And so I do. So for me, it gets a score of 7.3 out of 10. I had a good time with it. It's 16 Stoners May Break My Boners with the score of 7.3 out of 10. And next we have Mythian, Chronicles of Ethan, book number 1, written by John L. Monk. This is a Mount No Press novel. It is 239 pages. It is $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here is the author's description. Retirement means immortality. Immortality means adventure. Life begins at 70. Running on the world's fastest quantum computer is a very special game, one where retirees leave their flesh and blood alive to search for an endless adventure. Weapons, spells, gold, experience points. These are all the marks by which life is now measured. Ethan Crane wants none of it. In fact, he never wanted to retire at all, let alone play a game for all eternity. But now he's on a mission to find his wife. A wife he just discovered is still alive and inside the game. Nothing will stop him from reaching her, not even himself. Okay. Full disclosure, I received an advance copy of this novel. I purchased a copy when it became available. This is a digital afterlife story. And I I feel like there is plenty of talk about the digital afterlife portion of the story, but there's not a lot of payoff. And I think there are other better digital afterlife for like retirees dealing with issues with virtuality. I won't name them, but this is kind of an okay version of that. In the story, an older main character who doesn't really feel that old in the text, he is seeking his deceased wife, whom he kind of discovers after her death, copied herself into a fantasy RPG story, into a fantasy RPG like world, uploaded to Rain before she died. And in this particular world, there are various RPG aspects, including levels or wards of the game, where the stakes increase the higher of a ward you travel to. And to get to each new one, you have to beat a particular guardian, and each ward is harder with fewer rooms for error. In Ward 1, you get infinite lives. In Ward 2, you get 1,000 lives. In Ward 3, you get 100 lives. And in Ward 4, you get 10 lives. And if you beat all the wards and all the bosses, apparently you get returned to the real world into an immortal robotic frame with like indistinguishable like characteristics from a real human. Apparently, your immortality. You get to the whatever it's called, where mind and machines work together, whatever it is. But that's the goal of this particular like world for rich people. The setup of the story is a little wonky, but the main character is in the game world by about the 10% mark. So there is this kind of a longer transition section into that game world, but once he's there, he's there for the entire story. And from there, the main character's goal is to reach level 25, where he'll get like apparently a guide to his wife, who is for some reason in a Sleeping Beauty situation where she's not actually awake. And so she's just supposed to be waiting there for him in the second ward, and he has to get to level 25 for some arbitrary reason. And I'll get into why that annoys me. But personally, I kind of dislike the opening of the story. It has like heavy cyberpunk undertones, which is an issue for me personally. If you don't have issues with cyberpunk stories, or like how they try to mix them into like LitRPG and it never really kind of works, you're probably like, there's better than I would. But for me, those cyberpunk undertones eventually ruined the story for me. The beginning, I kind of had issues with it because once they were introduced with and again, this is kind of a weird opening, and I don't think I'm spoiling too much, but the main character is 70, his wife dies under mysterious circumstances, and there's this long explanation about how people who are older are given the option to upload their minds to these video game worlds, right? Which is perfectly cool. I'm okay with that. But he gets a mysterious message saying that, oh, even though you don't think your wife was introduced into this, I, as her biggest fan, uploaded her into the game world of the story here. And because she's unregistered, I had to hide her in the second ward and put her into like this coma in the game. And you can come save her if you get there and give her a kiss. And that's really is the setup of the story. That's the premise in which the main character decides to upload his mind into this game world permanently. So I'm like, well, okay, that's a start. That doesn't seem like it makes sense to me, but it's a way to get him in the world. So that is what it is. But there very much is like this cyberpunk undertone to that beginning. And to me, what that says is once that was set up, I'm like, oh, okay, there's going to be a lot of lies here in that setup and deceptions. And it means that I understand why they're there, because of the cyberpunk kind of like nature of those undertones, that it's meant to be like, oh, there are going to be these surprise twists in the story that shows like what the main character was told really isn't the truth and reality isn't as it's supposed to be. And they're meant to like subvert, the game world, which normally in a cyberpunk story is perfectly fine. But when you try to mix that into a LitRPG story, there are usually issues where it conflicts with the RPG world that I'm expecting to enjoy. And in general, my experience has been when those cyberpunk themes are there, that they make the RPG aspects less important, if not irrelevant. And so that was my thinking as soon as I realized, oh, that's what that setup's going to do. And to some degree, I was kind of right by the end of the story. There are things that kind of show, oh yeah, that kind of is there. NPCs are self-aware and they hate their roles and often have powers to alter the game in small ways, like making things appear, or having special powers that you don't normally think they would, or being self-aware, like fully sentient beings. Some of them anyways, not all of them. There are also several social mechanics in the story that are introduced, but are completely irrelevant and they don't really matter to the story. It kind of feels like the author was playing with them a little bit and then kind of just abandoned that particular concept. But there are also game mechanics that are based completely on what the individual player believes. And I'm like, that is a little, just a tiny bit annoying, just because that means there's not consistent game mechanics for every single character, which makes me think that if that's not consistent, are other things not consistent? So should I really care about them if they don't really matter? But worst of all is kind of the ending. And it's the ending that kind of, up until like that point, literally up until like the last 10% of the story, I was kind of on the fence of like, okay, this is probably about 7.1, 7.2. There are issues, but for the most part, the dungeon stuff, the dungeoning stuff was pretty decent. So I'm like, okay, maybe this is still kind of entertaining. But the end of the story, it ends on a cliffhanger. It literally kills an interesting quest line, what feels like right before it's going to be resolved. And it literally, for me at least, made the leveling stuff that came before it feel like it really didn't matter. I mean, except as kind of an arbitrary progression point of like, oh, now that you're this level you need, we're just going to suddenly move on into something else entirely and abandon everything that you've done before. I'm like, oh, it's like, oh, it was quite frustrating for me. And once I looked at the story as a whole, I realized, oh, as far as like the plot goes, of him like trying to get to War II and get to his wife, you can kind of just skip from when the main character enters the world at the 10% mark and go all the way to like the 95% mark. And the plot line would advance the same. Like all the stuff in the middle, even though it's not poorly written, even though it's like a pretty decent dungeon knife stuff, as far as like the plot goes, it didn't really have an impact, again, except as like this kind of arbitrary marker of saying, oh, he has to get to level 25 for an arbitrary reason, to advance to this next place where his wife might or might not be. You know, and so that for me was probably the point where the story was kind of ruined for me. And again, that's absolutely just me. And again, that kind of ties back into the cyberpunk influence, which just, doesn't work for me in general. I've never really found it to be compatible with the LitRPG concept or LitRPG novels in general, just because again, cyberpunk is intentionally written as a way of subverting like the game systems in general, right? Or the cyber world. And LitRPG stuff, to me, when it's really done well, I feel like the game world is really solid and the game mechanics matter to the story. And so those two ideas and those two kind of storytelling are inherently have a conflict in my brain, at least as far as I've seen it. I think I might have seen it done, but once. In all the like 900 stories LitRPG stories that I've read and reviewed. Again, not everything is bad in the story. I don't think there is. Again, there's decent dungeon diving for like a good middle portion of the section of the story. And there are RPG mechanics here. It is an LitRPG story. There's leveling, there's character sheets, stats, classes, skill points, XP, and quest. And again, I was really getting into like the last quest line. I thought, oh, this feels a little bit different at least. This is kind of a twist, or this is going to be something interesting. And again, except that it gets cut off and it's like absolutely ruined. For what it is. And again, this might be something that's continued on in the next book, but I'm like, I'm not sure I want to read it because this one kind of ruined the story for me. And overall, again, there were some good points. A lot of good XP grinding in the middle of the story, reasonably good action descriptions, good party builds, variety of monsters to fight. But again, the end of the novel kind of ruined it for me. So that's how I feel about it. So the story gets a score of 6 out of 10. It doesn't work for me. It might work for you if you don't have the issues of the kind of concept that if you don't mind cyberpunk stuff or you love cyberpunk and you're a huge fan of it and you like how it mixes with LitRPG in what you've read, you might like this more than I would. Please go read it. Go give it a chance. It's on Kindle Unlimited. You can go check it out and see if it works for you or not. For me, by the end of the story, it just really didn't. It's again, Mythian, Chronicles of Ethan, book number 1, with the score of 6 out of 10. Okay, next we have Ian's pick of the week. This is a new segment to the show. Contributor Ian Mitchell, who's a longtime LitRPG community member who reads and reviews just as much as me. He's nice to agree to and can join the LitRPG podcast family as a new reviewer for us. And he has a few reviews for you this week. And we're going to start off with a review for Reborn Apocalypse Volume Number 2, a LitRPG wuxia story. And I'm totally jealous that he got a chance to read this for me. I didn't have a chance to read it again very full schedule every week. And so I'm happy that he reviewed it. I'm jealous that I haven't had a chance to read it yet, though. It's enjoyable. I enjoyed book number 1, immensely. Book number 2, here's Ian's review. Wow. I love the first book. I really like the way various battles and conflicts went. They read like finely crafted clockwork mechanisms. Reading this book brings Bleach, the Realm books, and even the feedback loop to mind. I like some of the mechanics that, like the limited number of power slots, the somewhat simplified cultivation as a skill, and being able to buy stuff from the store on the fly. This was a great, exciting read. Score 8 out of 10. 8.8 out of 10 from Ian. Okay, next is going to be City of Freedom, Adam Online book number 2, written by Max Largo. Ian's review is this. This one felt like The Sims mixed with an MMO crossed with Kiln People. One really long, strange day. Strap in and enjoy the ride. The almost harming Cooper level of weird, I really liked it. Gets a score of 8.5 out of 10 from Ian. After that, it is Troll Nation, the third book of the Rogue Dungeon series, written by James A. Hunter and Eden Hudson. Here's Ian's review. He says, gives it a score of 9.2 out of 10 and says, this is definitely one of my must-read now series. I love the organized, supposedly low-level dungeon being turned into a well-tuned grief, the player machine. The very few strong characters really carry the book. I did have a bit of suspension of disbelief regarding a prison breakout. Why didn't they just pay to get the guy out? Perhaps I missed something. These books are so much fun regarding slaughtering the players that visit the troll dungeon. I think in places the trolls bring snacks to watch the show. Definite recommend for both the books and the audiobooks. And I definitely read these. This is a fun series. You should definitely check it out if you have a chance. There's also a companion cookbook series for this, and you could definitely read that as well. It's like it's an actual cookable LitRPG cookbook, so definitely check that out. And the last review from Ian is for Small Medium Well Done, which is the third book in that series. I believe it doesn't actually say on like the title or anything. And this is Ian's review. Wow, what a non-stop exciting adventure. I felt like I was playing in a tabletop game with an expert storyteller running things. This one finishes up this adventure with plenty of story hooks for another series. I definitely recommend this series and Threadbare first, of course. And again, you don't have to, this is by the Andrew Sipple, who writes through the Threadbare series, which is a massively popular literary story. And this is set in the same universe, but it doesn't necessarily have the same characters. Different main character, same world, same story, RPG mechanics. So just be aware of that. And he gives it Ian gave it a score of 8.4 out of 10. So he had a good time with it. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. That's the show. Thank you for hanging out with me today. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, our webpage at litrpgpodcast.com, and just any of those social media places. Just look out for the LitRPG podcast, and you'll be able to find us and like us and get the latest weekly reviews and, of course, the show on a weekly basis. You can also subscribe to us on any of your podcasts for the audio version of the podcast delivered right to you. We also have links for other great LitRPG Facebook pages, including LitRPG Books, LitRPG Society, The Fantasy Nation, and Spoiled Rotten Readers. And of course, if you enjoy the podcast in any way, shape, or form, and you want to support us, help keep the show free and ad-free, you can find out all the ways to support us at litrpgpodcast.com/support. So again, thank you for hanging out with me, ladies and gentlemen, this week. And until we can hang out, remember to go read some LitRPG.